Thank you to the organizer for inviting me. Yes, I have a new title, and actually the title which is written here is the title of the file, and it's After Truth. But I thought that a better title would be Lying. So it starts with a quotation from a book by Cicela Bock, which is entitled Lying, Moral Choices in Public and Private Life. And the quotation is, human beings, after all, provide for each other the most ingenious obstacles to what partial knowledge and minimal rationality they can hope to command. I like this quotation. So, I think we tend to have a very romantic view of liars, or rather, of those who lie, of how and why they lie, and we lie. A romantic view in the sense in which René Girard uses the term indeceit, desire in the novel, whose French title was Mensonge romantique et vérité romanesque, that is to say, romantic lie and novelistic truth. Our common paradigm of the lie is willful deceit. The liar, we think, knows the truth, but he or she willfully hides it. The liar misrepresents what is the case to manipulate others to his or her own advantage. The liar knows something that we do not know. Otherwise, he could not deceive us, for we would know the truth. Or she successfully claims an authority which she does not have to trick us and declare that what we know is false. In short, the liar exerts his power over us, and we are his victims. He is autonomous, not only in the sense that he is in control, but the liar is also autonomous, it seems, in relation to truth itself. First, in that truth does not constrain him any more than he allows it to, any more than submitting to the truth suits his purpose. And second, in that the liar has the power to make truth inoperative, it seems, to neutralize its force and evidence. The liar so conceived is the romantic self, the autonomous hero that fascinates us. Machiavelli's prince, Stavrogin's in Dostoevsky's The Demon, the liar, unlike us, his hapless victims, is powerful, independent, and in control. This conception of lying and the liar corresponds closely to the romantic lie that Girard analyzed in his early works. The spontaneous belief that others enjoy an autonomy which we lack, and the desire to remedy that failure and inferiority, both by denying the superiority of the other and by claiming for ourselves, both by denying the superiority of the other and claiming for ourselves the autonomy and power that we resent in him. Our classical conception of liar and lying reflects the ambivalent relation of those we denounce and condemn. On the other hand, we see lying as a failure and as a sign of weakness. And on one hand, we see lying as a failure and a sign of weakness, and on the other, we see it as a sign of the independence and the freedom of those who dare. And sometimes, we even tend to consider that lying and deceit are a normal, nearly natural attribute of all those who are rich and powerful. We idolize the liars that we denounce. We grant them extraordinary, nearly superhuman powers, like those who believe, for I think many of them believe, that mass shootings are elaborate mise-en-scène, staged for the benefit of the anti-gun lobby, and that the victims are but actors hired to trick and to deceive. Those who accept such conspiracy theory are in fact saying, it is mind-boggling what great power have those who are trying to deceive us. The mirror image of the romantic lie liar is provided by those who are so convinced that they possess a fundamental truth, either political, religious, or otherwise, that they view themselves as entirely justified to lie, to dissimulate, and to mislead others in order to defend or promote the absolute or merely important truth of which they think themselves the depository. As Cicela Box writes, they may perpetrate so-called pious frauds to convert the unbelieving or strengthen the conviction of the faithful. They see nothing wrong in telling untruths for what they regard as a much higher truth. They delude and trick us for our own good, they say. A good of which we are unaware. But these abuses, they think, are no fault and can do no harm, for they who resort to them are invested with the truth. Such is, for example, the great inquisitor in Dostoevsky, the brother Karamazov, who hides the truth from the common people because the truth is not what they need. It will make them unhappy, he thinks. That the truth is not what men need is the paradoxical higher truth to which the inquisitor adheres. These two are mimetic doubles. Guardians of those higher truths are the enemy brothers of the deceitful liars who they admire so much that they imitate them. These two are perfect twins in their common disregard for what is. Following Girard, I want to argue that liars, I have a wire here which is bothering me. I have to argue that liars, whether they are guardians of a higher truth or merely seek their own advantage, do not know the truth. To put it otherwise, I want to argue that they lie to themselves as they lie to others. I do not mean simply that they lie to themselves as much as they lie to others, but that it is because they lie to themselves that they lie to others. That in lying to others, they also lie to themselves, and that the two actions cannot be clearly separated. This said, I do not deny the existence of what may be called Machiavellian lie. That is, of lying as we usually understand it. Lying as saying what is false in full knowledge of what is the case. Rather, my argument is that the endeavor to deceive others is inseparable from a form of self-deception. My goal then is to explicate the conception of lying that is already present in Girard's early book, Deceit, Desire, and the Novel, originally published in 1961, and Resurrection from the Underground, Fyodor Dostoevsky, originally published in 1963, and to argue that lying so understood underlies what we usually consider as such, and see what this may tell us about our present situation after truth. According to the early Girard, behind or underlying triangular desire or imitated desire, because he doesn't speak of mimetic desire at that point, lies a metaphysical desire. To the imitation of the model and the attempts to appropriate what he or she desires, what the subject truly needs, really seeks, and ultimately wants, is to ravish the being of the model. That is to say, to become like the model. Self-subsistence, autonomous, to obtain the complete and perfect form of existence that he or she attributes to the model. But of course, that attribution is false. The model is just like the subject, just like us, fragile and vulnerable. His or her mastery and independence are illusory, misrepresentation which he or she may or may not willfully project and encourage. The fundamental lie involved, according to Girard, is that the subject perceives but refuses to accept both his or her fragility and lack of being and the apparent superiority of the model. The subject claims his independence from the model and the autonomy of his own desire. He refuses to admit that he imitates the other, that his desires are guided by the model. At the origin of this metaphysical desire, and of the multiple forms of triangular desire is the illusion of a radical difference between the self and the model. The subject wants to appropriate this difference. That is to say, the subject wants to invert it. If that is the case, however, can we really accuse the subject of lying? Is he or she not simply the victim of an inevitable illusion, of an honest mistake? There are in Girard's later work some passages that tend to support this interpretation. We're all children before becoming adults, and our parents were generally our first mimetic models and rivals. Parents are to children others who are all-powerful to help them or harm them, who, in a sense, truly have the fullness of being which the children do not have, at least at first. They also impose upon children norms of what is right and what is wrong, giving themselves as models to be imitated, but not always, nor in all circumstances. How can children, that is, each one of us, avoid the illusion of a model endowed with a perfection of being that is denied to us? As time goes by, children become disenchanted of their parents because of their failing and because of the inability to resolve the rivalry between them. We turn elsewhere to seek the fullness of being to which they introduce us. It follows that the victims of romantic illusions are not evil, simply inevitably deluded. Some of Girard's later explanation of the greater mimetic instinct among humans as a biological characteristic of the species seems to go precisely in that direction of a necessary, inevitable illusion that is at the origin of mimetic desire. Cesareo Bandera, in a recent book and conference, criticized Girard on this issue, arguing more or less that Girard cannot have it both ways. Either there is something spiritual in mimetic rivalry, in the sense that there is a moral failure involved, or it is a purely natural phenomenon. In the latter case, the explanation of culture provided by mimetic theory, adds Bandera, cannot be made consistent with Christian revelation. Or to put it in another way, Girard's choice in his later work of a naturalistic explanation of mimesis undermines, rather than it supports, his religious and moral commitment. However that may be, it should be remembered that one does not need to know the truth in order to be free of illusion, or be free of illusions in order to lie. That is to say, lying to oneself and to others is different from simply being the victim of an illusion, though an illusion may underlie that behavior. So, about deceit and self-deceit. At first sight, the claim that lying to oneself proceeds or grounds lying to others seems highly paradoxical. Many authors have argued that lying to oneself is not merely paradoxical, but that it is strictly impossible. Why? Because according to our common paradigm, lying requires the liar to know the truth. Otherwise, he or she would only make a mistake. When I told you that John was out, I was not trying to deceive you. I just did not know that he had already returned. Right? And lying is only successful if the hearer is deceived. And that requires, among other things, that the hearer does not know the truth. Given this, it seems that lying to oneself is impossible because, in order to be successful, it requires the liar both to know and not know the truth simultaneously. To believe that something is the case and to believe that it is not the case. This argument, however, rests on an understanding of lying according to which, in order to lie, you first need to know the truth. Is that really the case? If we accept the idea that one can lie without knowing the truth, it seems that we could be in danger of losing the distinction between lying and making a mistake. That is not clear, however, for what is that distinction? The distinction between making a mistake and lying at first sight is simply that the person who makes the mistake does not know the truth, while the person who lies does know the truth. This answer, however, is clearly unsatisfactory, because the person who lies does not need to know the truth. It is enough for him or her to be aware that what she is saying is false. Furthermore, knowing the truth does not prevent a person from making a mistake, for any number of diverse reasons, because one is tired, preoccupied, in a hurry, not particularly interested, and so on. In short, knowing the truth does not prevent one from making a mistake, and not knowing the truth does not prevent one from lying. Another possible solution is that the distinction between lying and making a mistake ultimately boils down to a question of intention. As Cecilia Bach writes, the moral question of whether you are lying or not is not settled by establishing the truth or falsity of what you say. In order to settle this question, you must ask whether you intend your statement to mislead. The person lied if he or she had the intention of deceiving the other. If she did not have that intention, she simply made a mistake. Again, that answer, at least formulated in this way, is not entirely satisfactory, either because those who think they are depository of a higher truth will claim that their intention is, in resorting to untruth, is not to deceive others, but to the opposite, to help them. If we intend to mislead or to deceive, if the intent to mislead or to deceive is at the heart of lying to others, how about lying to oneself? Can you intend to deceive yourself? It seems that lying to oneself would require one to intend to deceive oneself. But is that possible? Probably not. Because there are many things that we cannot intend to do and nonetheless can do. For example, you intend to believe, for example, you intend to believe that the earth is flat or that God exists. You cannot intend to believe that the earth is flat or that God exists. And you cannot indeed intend to be spontaneous or to make a mistake or to know something to be different than you know that it is. And whatever, either you believe or you don't believe, act spontaneously or not. You know something or you don't, and whatever action you intentionally make, as far as your intention is concerned, it is not a mistake. Yet, you certainly can be spontaneous and believe these and many other things, make mistakes, and you can know what is. The same, it seems, therefore, that the fact that you cannot intend to deceive or mislead yourself clearly does not entail that you cannot deceive yourself. Many years ago, a Norwegian philosopher by the name of Jon Elster defined these mental states, the ones like which you cannot intend to have, believing, to be spontaneous, desiring, as states that are essentially byproducts, in the sense that they cannot be brought about directly by willing or intending them, but only as an indirect consequence of doing something else. Take, for example, Pascal's famous wager concerning believing in God. Pascal recommends going through the actions of practicing religion regularly and diligently, saying that it would progressively bring about the belief. That you can make yourself believe by playing the game long enough is what Pascal claimed. Elster would argue, rightly according to me, that such a strategy can only work if you forget that to make yourself believe is what you are doing while going through the gestures. As long as you intentionally engage in the ritual to convince yourself that God exists or that religion is true, it will not work. Mistakes, beliefs, spontaneity, or even desires or mental states that cannot be the object of a direct intention. Of course, we can manipulate the environment in such a way that these beliefs, desires, or behaviors are likely to happen. But Elster's point is that we cannot manipulate ourselves, directly or indirectly, to bring them about. If such is the case, then maybe that deceiving oneself is also essentially a byproduct of doing something else, a state which, like belief or desire, does not arise by directly willing or intending it, but as a result of various circumstances. If we abandon the idea that self-deception requires the person to directly intend or deceive himself or herself, then it seems that what is needed for a person to deceive herself is that the same person be both the subject and the target, the agent and the patient of the deception. Is that possible? Can a person be the agent of deception if it is the case that this person cannot intend to deceive himself? How can that be possible? Well, it is clear that when I believe something, I am the agent. I am the one who believes, even though I cannot intend to believe this or that. Furthermore, as Margaret Anscombe noted long ago, there is an important difference between doing something with an intention, intending to do something, and doing something intentionally. For example, I intend to visit my friend John tonight, and tonight it is raining. As I set out, my intention is not to walk in the rain, but to visit John. Yet it is certainly intentionally that I walk in the rain. Similarly, I wish to argue that though we cannot have the intention of deceiving ourselves, we cannot intend to deceive ourselves, we can nonetheless be the agent of our own deception and deceive ourselves intentionally. What are then the circumstances that may bring about an agent to deceive himself? What is self-deception a byproduct of? From a mimetic point of view, the most plausible answer to that question is, I believe, to be deceived. That is to say, deceiving oneself is a consequence or a byproduct of being deceived. From a mimetic point of view, we should not see self-deception as primarily a relationship to oneself, but as a relationship to others. We deceive ourselves, but for others and because of others. We deceive ourselves, Girard would argue, I think, as a byproduct of having been deceived. What is, from the point of view of the victim of a deception, the distinction between having been deceived and having made a mistake? Clearly, it is the intention of the deceiver to mislead. If we accept that as a fact, we will rapidly face an unsuitable conundrum in the case of self-deception. However, we do not need to make such a rash hypothesis. Is deceived he or she who forms an expectation that is then cancelled or proven false by the very agent that aroused, incited, or simply occasioned that expectation? This does not require, on the part of the agent who deceived, any intention to mislead, simply perhaps a change of heart. At some point, the other will then be deceived, both in the sense that he or she experiences a disappointment, a frustrated desire, and in the sense of feeling cheated. Self-deception is a possible form of reaction to that deception. It is a mimetic response. The deceived person feels rejected by the other who first drew him or her to the expectation. He or she sees no reason for the rejection, no sufficient cause, and yet cannot escape the judgment that has been passed upon him or her. To the extent that the expectation was motivated by the imitation of the model's desire, so will the deception be inseparable from the imitation of the model's present coldness and disfavor. The subject imitates the model's judgments upon him or herself, a judgment that he or she can neither justify nor understand. The subject is then in the position where he can deceive himself. To do that the subject only needs to simultaneously imitate the model's original favor and his later disfavor. He or she can neither abandon the original embrace nor the subsequent rejection of the model, and reads in those contradictory behavior the proof of the model's deviousness. That in the series of events, the subject or the model or both could simply have made a mistake is not an option. That is not, and that it is not, is the very sign of its mimetic dimension. This behavior is mimetic, and the subject fails to recognize it. We can nonetheless say that the subject deceives himself intentionally because his deception is a byproduct of his desire to fulfill the promise of the original expectation, in spite or in the face of the rejection. Lying to others, in our common conception of lying as deceit, I want to argue, derives from this fundamental mimetic self-deceit. Appearances notwithstanding, mimetic self-deceit is not an oxymoron. There is nothing paradoxical about the fact that in deceiving herself, a person imitates another. Girard has often insisted on the distinction between imitation of representation, as when we imitate another person's way of walking or of dressing, or a taste and opinion, and mimetic desire, the imitation of desire. In the first case, imitation leads to predictable results. The imitator's actions reflect those of the model. In the imitation of desire, the results are a lot less predictable and can take shapes that not only do not resemble the behavior of the model, but can often be seen as contradicting it. It is only later in the process of reciprocal imitation that the subject and the model will appear as mimetic doubles through the very effort they make to distinguish and oppose each other. The person who deceives himself does not imitate another agent which he or she sees as deceiving himself. Self-deception does not rest on imitation of representation, nor does he imitate the deception of his deceiver, the act of deceiving in that sense, right? He does not copy what he sees the other as doing. Rather, he imitates the judgment that condemns him. In other words, the non-desire of which he is the victim, and yearns to capture the autonomy of his judge, which he desires to emulate and to which he feels entitled. The more he feels entitled to his autonomy, which was promised to him by the person who now condemns him, and the more the condemnation that befell him appears to be false. His model must have lied. The model must have had another unknown motive to declare him unworthy. This condemnation thus is false, a lie that hides the subject's truth. That is the truth of the person who feels he has been lied to. And the subject will now lie because he feels that he has been lied to, because lying is a necessary means to defend his truth, his worth, the importance against the enemy that denies it. The other, the model, has changed the rules of the game and has made lying both justified and inevitable. Lying now appears as a normal part of the fabric of the world. The subject feels he has been lied to because he deceives himself, simultaneously imitating in his relation to himself the past favor and the present rejection of the model. He both loves and despises himself and the other. From then on, the infinite variety of reasons for lying become available to him. Lying becomes a normal behavior that can be morally justified and as the need may arise. However, behind the innumerable circumstances that determine the need to lie, the motive remains the same, to pursue contradictory process of imitation and rivalry, whose byproduct is self-deception. So finally, after-truth. The expression after-truth is generally understood to mean post-truth. It refers to the idea that truth is over, that it is passé. After-truth does not mean that there is no such thing as truth, but rather that there is no such thing as truth anymore. It has elapsed for one or another of a number of reasons, either because the world has changed and there is no way to know the truth about the world in which we live, or because truth is not judged to be important. And we now have better, more interesting, or valuable things to do. As a consequence, we are now closed off from truth. Thus, we live in a period that may be defined as after-truth or post-truth, one in which truth has been left behind, where there is nothing of value anymore. We now have either to do without it or to try to bring it back if we can. After-truth, understood in this sense, is more a sociological consideration than a philosophical thesis. At first sight, at least, the target of after-truth is not so much the idea of truth itself than the fact that truth has lost its importance within a large part of our social and political and cultural life. The behavior of important social actors, newspaper, internet, televised media, and social networks, and of major political actors, politicians, political parties, and commentators, suggest that they do not consider truth and truthfulness to be of paramount importance anymore. This new situation, it can be argued, is not primarily or simply due to the frequency of lying in the contemporary world. For lies, deceit, and cheating have always played an important role in political life. That's clear. Furthermore, it is said that lies, in order to be successful, inevitably offer an homage to truth in the breach. Furthermore, it is said that, in this process, they reaffirm its importance, the importance of truth. Liars do not give themselves to what they are, but pretend to be truthful. Similarly, deception involves causing another to accept as true or valid what is false or invalid, while cheating implies dissimulation, hiding the truth. All these behaviors clearly recognize the centrality of truth. As Kant understood it, lying is parasitic on truth. That is why it cannot, without contradiction, be transformed into a universal law. What seems characteristic of after-truth is not simply lying as such. Rather, it is a kind of indifference to both truth and falsity, a lack of interest or failure to be bothered by the incompatibility between the one and the other, a lack that can take many different forms. For example, Piet Hoekstra, the ambassador of the Netherlands, to the Netherlands, soon after being appointed by the Trump administration, was interviewed by a Dutch journalist. You previously claimed, said the journalist to Hoekstra, that there are in the Netherlands some no-go zones, that is, areas where Muslim militants prevent non-Muslim from entering. However, the journalist added, there's no such zones, no-go zones in the country. Hoekstra's first response was simply to deny that he had ever said such a thing. This accusation, he claimed, was fake news. The journalist then showed Hoekstra and the public a video where Hoekstra claims precisely that there are no-go zones, precisely that there are in the Netherlands no-go zone areas where non-Muslims are not allowed to penetrate. When asked immediately after being shown the video whether this was fake news, the ambassador replied, I've never said fake news. I didn't use that word. Blatant lies have always existed. We should not, however, reduce such incidents to another illustration of the incompetence and inanity of our political adversaries. They suggest something more fundamental, that in our public life, truth does not count anymore. That there is no need to take it into account. After truth, precisely. Such behavior not only suggests that their authors believe there are no political or even personal price to pay for repudiating evident truth, basic logic, and honesty, they also indicate a different relation to what is, and hence, to truth. That lying, as it is usually understood, that is to say, that lying, essentially considered as the action of a deceiver. This different relation to what is can take wholly different forms, which nonetheless rest on a similar disregard for the consequences of ignoring reality. Around 2004, many TV stations and other important media outlets adopted under the name of balanced reporting, a policy that gave equal time to opinions that were vastly unequal in terms of their factual or scientific support. One example concerns vaccines. On the basis of research that was widely known to be flawed and rejected by the scientific community, some argued that vaccines cause autism. And they were given equal time as experts that stressed the importance of vaccine for social well-being and rejected the fraudulent claim of a causal relationship between autism and vaccines. Through this policy, the media has asserted the importance of various other values than truth, in particular equality, but perhaps simply viewers' rate, or avoiding controversy. It is now argued that in consequence of this balanced reporting, policy vaccination rates plummeted. And a little more than 10 years later, that is in 2014 and 15, there was in the United States an outbreak of measles, which for the last 40 years had been considered as a nearly eradicated disease. The media and other supporters of balanced reporting policy argued that all opinions are equal to the extent that someone supports it. Therefore, rejecting an opinion outright, silencing it, recognizing that it has less importance than other opinion, evinces disrespect for those who hold it. Be that as it may, the argument centers on the relation between the speaker and his and her opinion. Of that opinion's relation to what is, to the truth, to reality, it takes no account. After truth, fake news, alternative facts are not descriptive terms. They are accusations. Fake news are not fake because they are false. They may very well be true. They are fake because they are news that serve the purpose of others, of the political adversary, the feminists, the alt-right, the Black Lives Matter, the White Lives Matters, the police, the left-wing militants, in short, of others. Similarly, alternative facts are facts that serve the purposes of the alternative. All the better if they can be true, but that is not really the point. The point of fake news and alternative fact is that they serve the others. That is why Piek Oostra could claim that the report of his saying there were no-go zones in the Netherlands was fake news, because clearly this journalist was bringing this to light in order to discredit him. The agent who lies to himself and to others prioritizes among his relation to what is, to the world, to all that is out there, his or her relation to the other. He understands his model of rejection as a lie, that is, not as a true and justified rejection, but as fake news, as something for which the other has some other ulterior motive. Progressively, as the rivalry reaches new height, he will extend to more and more aspects of what is this other-centered, self-centered perception. Victims are actors. It never happened. The bulk of the world's scientific community has been falsifying data concerning global warming. Our adversaries are deplorables. Mimetic doubles never make mistakes. No evidence can ever falsify their beliefs, because all evidence is to be judged by the person who brings it forward. Can only make mistakes those who live in a world that is not centered around them and their rivals. A world that is indifferent to our hopes and desires, of which we humans are not the center. In which we live as one type of creatures and objects among myriads of others. A world that was not designed for us and that is not designed by us. Those who make mistakes, and only them, need to seek the truth and can seek the truth. Only them can be searching after truth. Thank you.